Rabbi Tobia Sr. does a little deep dive on Paul and whether or not was Paul swinging on the other team, so to speak. I don't want to get canceled on YouTube. But it's not about politics. It's not about the wokenism. It's just about what's happening in those time and what, I guess you could say history or what knowledge they have about him. Gonna be something that has been going on there. So let's make a deep dive on that. Let's start the intro. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, the most merciful and most kind. Welcome back. Thank you guys. We reached over 800 subscribers. And we still strive to reach over 1,000. So subscribe, like, comment, and share. Let me know what you guys think. And without further ado, let's begin.
I'm going to take this super chat question. Gelato, thank you for your super chat. Why does he say he went to Arabia after his epiphany?
His motive wasn't Arabia like he was a world traveler. His motive was the beginning of the passage, the opening of Galatians 1:17, and that is, I didn't go to Jerusalem. That means I didn't go west. I went east. That's the point. I went the opposite way. The whole point of the first two chapters of Galatians say that I have a unique revelation that's directly from Jesus. I didn't have a middleman. I got it directly, and this is a theme constantly. And there,
it doesn't. I mean, if you think about it, in Christianity, Jesus is God. Now he got a revelation from God directly, and in a sense, he just told everybody that he's a prophet. Only the prophets get direct revelation from God. So that's what he's saying. I think that's why he says that he's got his own gospel. He's got his gospel. Doesn't say he's got the gospel of Jesus. He's got gospel of God. No, he says his gospel. So I believe he thought of himself, or at least he portrayed himself as a type of prophet to the people. He's definitely a fake and a fraud.
therefore, I owe nothing to Jerusalem. And and that's why always will you find in the book of Acts that Paul is more dependent on Jerusalem than you'll find in Paul's own letters. Oh, in every stage, and when comparing Acts with the letters of Paul repeatedly is de-emphasizing his dependence on Jerusalem. Certainly he's not going to talk about circumcising Timothy or any of that kind of crazy stuff. Well, that doesn't get into Paul. That doesn't fit his narrative. So you always find Paul is a couple of weeks I spent with the brother of Jesus or whatever, but that's it. But what I have is directly from Jesus Christ. So that's exactly what James said. Arabia is not the point. It's not like he went to see the Kaaba.
Yeah, it's odd. So the apostles, all the time that Jesus spent, his entire ministry, kind of worthless. It was like a waste of time for Jesus. Like, there's no point to even do any of that stuff. He's going to give Paul this revelation on it. There's no reason for him to have 30 years of ministry because, it didn't matter. And to believe that, you have to believe that really Jesus really did come for the people of Israel. He didn't come for everybody. It's just conflicting. Doesn't make any sense. Even though he's supposedly the Messiah from the Jewish Bible, but the one came in for everybody as well. It didn't just come in for the people of Israel. It's just a lot of word salad that Christians have to use to kind of conflate their theology with Christians. It doesn't make any sense.
It's not. He didn't go on a Hajj. That's not what he's trying to tell you. He's trying to tell you is, I didn't go to Jerusalem. That was the point.
Right. And you raise another good point, Rabbi, is the tension between Acts and the letters. It's impossible to square the narrative in Acts with the letters themselves. Acts is giving us a distinctly different impression about certain things than the letters are. There's more trips to Jerusalem in Acts than there are in the letters. Just to take one example, there, scholars, very eminent scholars like Bart Ehrman, have argued that the author of Acts was unaware of Paul's letters, did not know Paul's letters, because frankly, many other scholars as well have observed use there on a number of grounds. It's really impossible to square the letters and Acts. So what early Christian tradition about Paul is even contradicts what Paul is telling us in those letters. So there's just another reason to question and doubt the credibility of what we're being told in both, it seems to me. It's not as though Acts is enhancing or diminishing, just the contradiction in itself. I can't trust either. Acts does not appear to me to be very accurate historically, although there's some very interesting details. And as Rabbi says, from the argument from embarrassment, it's hard for me to understand how a later Christian would have invented some of those embarrassing details. But on the other hand, I don't put much credibility in either the letters of Paul or Acts, because they are impossible to square. And in many cases, I can't decide what would be right and what would be wrong.
And I think Acts is almost written as an apologetic for Paul by somebody else. I mean, we all know everything is done by anonymous people, but in a way it is. It's almost like passing the whole baton to Paul. They mention the apostles just a little bit, just a sprinkle, mention their names. That's it. That's done. You're never going to listen to them again. We're going to focus on Paul. So that's, I think, it's mostly what it was for. Somebody who follows Paul or thinks about Paul or whatever it may be, but it's about passing the baton to him and kind of making him the center figure for Christianity.
Right. One other thing maybe is intriguing. If we can go back to the 50s and meet Paul as he's writing and ask him, what are you writing? So he would no doubt say he's writing letters to communities where he's, except for Romans, where he's already been, and there are problems, and he's writing letters to people. What he definitely would not say is, I'm writing a part of the New Testament, I'm writing scripture. So Paul's letters were meant to be read by communities, and the book of Galatians was written to many churches in Asia Minor, but he's writing letters. He doesn't see himself as writing a New Testament. The book of Acts, on the other hand, the author of Acts, this is pretty late, and scholars differ over the age of Acts, wildly argue over its age, but it could be 85, it could be 2nd century, surely. But the author of Acts, the argument could be made, Luke Acts was written by someone who thought of himself as writing scripture. So it's really quite different. So the writer of the book of Acts would not feel compelled to read personal letters written to churches all over the Mediterranean. He's writing, Luke Acts I think, thinks of himself as writing scripture, writing the bedrock of what's the story of the church when Jesus, the life of Jesus in the book of Luke, and what happened to the church after the death and resurrection. So because the author of Acts thinks he's writing a Bible in a sense, or contributing to scripture, but structure is as such, it's not a letter. So you could see why the author of Acts would not take letters as seriously. He took Paul very seriously, but not the letters. And 2 Peter will do the same. We'll work very hard to make sure everyone knows everyone's on the same. We're all on the same. We're on the same team here.
Is Paul's reason for misquoting Tanakh just as a result of reading the Septuagint, or simply adding on words to the text to match his theological slant?
That's what you'll get in college. It's not correct. And professors, I think, are well-meaning. But no, Paul is changing the text very deliberately because he's married to an idea. And that idea is that no one should keep the law. He detested the law. I could guess why he hated the law. I think Christians will be very offended by what my thinking is. Oh, should I say it? I'll say it. And I'm curious to hear what James has to say. So I've had this conversation with many New Testament scholars. like what the heck was going on with Paul? Like, why was he so embittered towards the law? So I think it all. So there's one algorithm that seems to explain all these conundrums, and that is that Paul was not attracted to people of the opposite sex, and
That could explain why he's so adamant about being celibate. And he does say he's got a thorn on his side as well, or something. I think he was very troubled, and during those times, it's not something that was something you could speak about on there. So he seems like there was trouble. He was always spiritually just like in a mess on there, and you could see it on the way he wrote and everything. There was almost like he felt like there was a great weight upon him that was nothing to do with church, Christianity, or the Bible. It was something else.
that would explain everything. That would explain why, when he discovers the law, he realizes he's a sinner. Because we know that in the Roman Empire, look, very important that you, the viewer, just leave woke stuff. We're going into the ancient world, so just please, okay? So just whatever you are, I need to be able to explain. This is my thought, and I'm going to get it out there. Homosexuality was very much accepted in the empire at the time. You know, there's a lesser known work written by Rome's most important historian, I think Tacitus, a book called Germania, where he describes that there was homosexual behavior all over the place. And he compares that behavior to those who would later sack Rome. Of course, Tacitus wasn't alive in the 5th century, but that's what happens later on. Why would Paul take on celibacy? Why would he flaunt it as something that was virtuous? Why did he feel his flesh that this pain? What was bothering him? Why did he feel so sinful? He wasn't around when the Manichaeist movement began, but it's very Manichaeist. Augustine adored Paul for very good reason. That would explain all of this. I've never said that on air, I don't think. But I don't know, but it just seemed that would explain 1 Corinthians 7, Romans 7. It would explain everything. And therefore, Paul would have an aversion to the law. Or else what was possessing him? Okay, this is my thought.
And we see that in Christianity as well. Christians that want to live a certain lifestyle immediately. They could be following the religion for 20, 30 years on. The second they choose, this is my new truth, all of a sudden, they throw everything under the bus. And then they have this epiphany of how it's not the truth, and I'm at peace with myself. It's the same thing. It's literally the same thing we see in Christianity all over the place, which is why now the flag is everywhere and all of that. It's for the same reason. It's like, he says something that I want to do is wrong. So now immediately that means everything written here is wrong, and it doesn't matter because I want to do it.
Could be wrong. I've thought about this for years, and I've sat down with people who both of you know, who've done shows. We try to work this out, and this seems to be what would explain everything. Now, so once Paul feels that strongly about the law, something compelled him to be this way. He was not a likable character, as I explained. Maybe this is stretching it, but maybe because, people who have struggled with the same sex attraction are very comfortable around women. Men who are that way are much more comfortable around women because there's not that sexual tension. That might contribute to that as well. So there's my thought. I don't know. It just seems like that just answers all the riddles of what's going on here. But he does stuff in his letters. He's being dishonest with his readers, and he can get away with it. In Romans 10, he is discussing a passage in Deuteronomy 30, Deuteronomy 30 is explaining why you can keep the Torah. You can keep it, and don't let anyone tell you that it's too difficult to keep the Torah. It's near to you. It's in your heart. Don't say it's over the sea. Who will bring it to us? Don't say it's in heaven. Who will bring it down to us? The word is near to you, verse 14, so that you can do it. It's just a simple passage, and I plead with you, the viewer, if you're probably watching this on a computer, to set up two browsers, please. Deuteronomy 30, verse 14 on one side, and open up Romans chapter 10, verse 8. Just open two side by side and just compare them. So Deuteronomy 30, verse 14 ends with, so that you can do it. That's the whole point. Paul eviscerates it. And I just say, if you doubt what I'm saying, please look it up for yourself. This is not a mistake. This is not an error that Paul eviscerates, cuts out, removes, that you may do it. That you may do it is the whole point. That's criminal. That's the kind of thing, if you would do with a contract, you would be disbarred for that. I mean, this is malicious. Did he get away with it? Of course he got away with it. Why? Because people were ignorant. One point I think should be made that people don't grasp is, in order to understand history, you have to divorce yourself from the world you live in and enter into another world. Books were not accessible in the ancient world. If you wanted a book, someone had to write it by hand, not on paper, on very expensive material. Papyrus, minimum, vellum, fabulous, but it cost a fortune. People couldn't just have a book. That was a very difficult prospect. So, James and I have frequently talked about the fact that his audiences were Gentiles, but truthfully, people didn't have access to books the way we do today. Dispel that notion from your mind.
I think there's a big problem with presentism and how they always want to put our time now in the past. I mean, this is why it's so beautiful. The Quran was kept and it was memorized. That's the key thing. Memorized. That, because yes, writing things down, finding parchment, I mean, they used bones to keep it because it's so hard for that. There's no books, there was no libraries or universities. So yeah, it is a daunting process of trying to preserve anything in those times.
When Erasmus was publishing the first New Testament in Greek, he had to find manuscripts of the New Testament in order to publish it in the beginning of the 16th century, and he couldn't find every manuscript. There's a part of the book of Revelation that he just couldn't find a Greek manuscript for, so he back translated a Latin text in order to get it. It's just the way things are. People, you can't think that you're in this world. Now, I could say to you, please open up two browsers. Right? In the ancient world, forget technology. That would be crazy. I'm setting aside the technology. Do you know how hard it would be just to find? People didn't walk around with a Bible map. Go look at the Codex Vaticanus. It's massive. It's on, I don't know how many sheep they had to kill to make that thing. A lot. It was like, it's a big thing.
Yeah, I guess people still don't understand that, don't see the stark difference that we have now. And I think now that with the technology, the ability to do just that, we are seeing the corruption. We are seeing the problems in it. And people are just leaving the church. They're seeing we have this forms of communication, so we expose, different lies, different things on there. And now nobody can keep the lie going. It's impossible. I urge everybody to go look this up, and just not go investigate actual Islam, the real Islam. Go read the Quran, see what it says, see what it actually teaches, not what quote you see, anywhere. Just sit down and actually read it. Read the words, written there, and you'll be very surprised by it. Well, I hope you guys liked the video. Let me know what you guys think. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. And until next time, peace.